All right, ladies and gents, welcome to week 4. You made it. That last week was pretty intense. I think some of this week's lectures will be pretty intense too, though I hope the homework will be better this week. I think that last homework is probably the hardest assignment we have in this class, depending on if you prefer the math or the writing. If you prefer the math, then it might have been the easiest assignment, and then the rest ones will be hard. But for those who prefer writing, I think that was the hardest one, and then after our homework this week, I think everything else is mostly article reviews and interpretation. So that'll be a lot more writing focused as we switch from implementation to application. As a reminder, the first half of our course is really focused on giving you the skills necessary to be able to engage in the conversation, to be able to use this. Really focused on the base kind of some of the base calculations. Remember, we started with mean and standard deviation, and then last week we talked about those foundations of inferential statistics and what that means, but also how we get there, what the equations are, what they mean, and how those get put together. This week we're talking about telling the story and kind of the role that everything plays within that story component, and then we'll end, the last half of class is all just application, example, application, example, with us doing reviews of those and just reading through those together. So that's going to be where we end up. And this is the transition point. This is the tipping point in class, kind of the middle fulcrum where we start to move from that review content, start to talk about how do we incorporate all the pieces together, and then we move on to see all the different pieces put together. So this is that tipping point. And again, the videos, there's a couple of them that are pretty long. I think I think most of them are actually pretty long now that I think about it. I think there's 6 videos, and I think 3 of them are pretty long and 3 aren't too bad. But a lot of content in there, a lot of explanation as to how we take the different components and really put it together. And all of it's important. It really is. I know I seem to kind of ramble. I probably do ramble a little bit, I guess. But it's all of those examples are real examples. All of those examples are clients I've actually dealt with. Most of the examples are clients I've dealt with within the past 6 months. And so it's all, I'm speaking to you as a statistician methodologist, tries to speak to potential clients and to help you understand maybe what you will do if you're ever implementing these kind of methods, and more specifically, how you can interpret them. If somebody else comes in with these to you, comes into your office and presents a report, what can you do? How can you take away? What pieces go together? What pieces don't go together? How can you interpret and make out of distinct pieces a cohesive whole? That is a lot of what this lecture this week is about. So as you're looking through, I really encourage you to, again, take the time. I know sometimes when there's not specific bullet points attached, or when there is not a math formula on there, it seems like it's less important. But as I discuss, I think in a couple of places, either in this week's content or last week's content, it really doesn't matter where the error comes. It doesn't matter if you calculated it wrong. It doesn't matter if the data was collected badly. It doesn't matter if the sample represented something different than you think. If you make a bad decision, you've made a bad decision. And in medicine, people get hurt. People die. And so the point here is, how do we put this information together in a way that when we are following the data, we can offer convincing evidence and results based on the evidence that we've collected? We don't want to be too confident, but neither do we want to be too hesitant. Both can be harmful. We want to really express ourselves clearly and accurately with the appropriate amount of confidence that our results show. So look for that. Look for ways in which you can think through this differently. Look for ways in which you can approach the concept of writing a report. And when I say statistical storytelling, really all I'm saying is writing a report. That's really it. or making an oral argument. You can do these things orally too. It's not just written. But really think through that. Think through how do I approach this in the first place? What are my goals here? And really, I encourage you to challenge those with some of the concepts, especially in that first video this week. There's a lot of kind of the tone of these reports I cover, and I encourage you to reflect on that. Because there's a lot of good material in there, and I think there's a lot to reflect on. It's something that I don't just encourage for you because you're a student, you're learning. I have to do it myself. All professionals really need to do this consistently. I do this with clients who publish all the time. I do this with active researchers in their fields. Some researchers who are much more senior than me, it's really necessary to recenter on what our goal is. It gets so easy to get lost in this. And especially for students who are learning this, in some of your cases for the very first time, you're trying to figure out, where do I put the decimal place? How do I add the, where does this number go? How do I even get that number? How do I do the calculation? And sometimes you forget what we're really doing here. And throughout this entire lecture set, throughout this entire week's content, I hope that's the big reminder. What the heck are we doing here? What's the goal? What's the purpose? And that's going to be a great way, I think, to transition again to the rest of class, which is less about where does the decimal go, less about what each number means. Though those things are unimportant. I shouldn't say what each number means, but how to calculate each number specifically, and more about what's the story, what's the interpretation, how do these things go together to create a cohesive whole. Where, and this is going to happen in some of your example articles. I'll be curious if which of you catch it and which articles you catch it in. Where are we overstating conclusions? Where are authors making conclusions that aren't supported by their data? Where are they correctly stating conclusions? Where are they making conclusions that are well supported by their data? And that encapsulates all of the things that we've talked about thus far. It encapsulates the descriptive statistics, it encapsulates the inferential statistics, it encapsulates the graphics, it encapsulates the study design that we talked about in the very first lecture set in this course. All of these things get pushed together to create this story, and all of it comes down to make recommendations, to make conclusions, to make decisions, and to have discussion. And again, the reason that I talk about encapsulating all this is because ultimately that's the story people tell. People rarely walk away having your data set memorized. That's just not something that happens. People walk away with a story. A well-done graphic can mean more than any number of charts you ever can construct, because people can remember what that looks like. People can remember the story that tells. On the other hand, if you construct graphics poorly, or if you construct graphics that demonstrate something that's misleading and isn't supported by your inferential and descriptive statistics, people still remember that story, even if it's not the story you're trying to tell. So being aware of that, being cognizant, being careful and intentional about how you put these things together, about what role each of our different pieces have to play, and about where those have an impact, I think is going to be really important as we transition to the last stage of this class. So it's a lot, but I hope it's really good. I do hope that the homework is a little bit better than last time, especially if you're not a math person. I think the last homework was our hardest mathy homework. So I hope that it's a little bit better. I hope you survive the videos. As always, please feel free to reach out with any questions. And otherwise, good luck with watching, and I hope this is a good transition as we move to the next and final stage of the class.